I'm most interested in how the workshop impacted you as it relates to the elevating of your voice and the recognition that uh, I'm not expecting you're going to tell me that you had a 75% increase or something like it was miraculous. But I'd like to understand maybe a little bit from you. And typically, as you probably would imagine, as I did the live event, we do like interaction. So if there's some thoughts that you have around that, that would be great. I would love to hear from you. And then I'd kind of like to also talk about, well, what are the things that you found that maybe tripped you up a little bit? Maybe you tried the pause and you found that, oh my gosh, 4 out of the 5 days that I started it, it just completely bombed, right? Or maybe you're the other side of that equation. Maybe you tried it for 4 out of the 5 days and it was awesome and it worked and it had impact. And then certainly I want to field any questions that you may have that will give you the opportunity to gain more clarity about emotional intelligence and its connection to elevating your voice and moving you to breakthroughs. So with that, I guess that's the part where I say, so tell me, how is it going with the elevating of voice? And I also recognize that some of you may not be in a position to unmute and go on video or whatever. If you want to type in the chat, that's fine too. But certainly feel free to unmute yourself, come on camera, join us in that regard too.
I can get started.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. So I feel like, when it comes to elevating your voice, you want your words to be as impactful as possible when you're using your voice, right? Like you want to be able to say meaningful things, and whether you're speaking to one person or multiple people, want to be able to you know make them take you seriously and be impactful. So I feel like it's funny you mentioned it, Eric, but that pause, if you're in a situation where it's not like you're necessarily prepared, like if you're in the midst of a conversation or a meeting, taking that pause, especially if it's getting to be a little bit emotional and emotions are raised, it really helps to not only calm yourself down and reframe, but to help you kind of make sure that the words that come out are those impactful and meaningful words, and that you're really reaching your audience. So I find that actually ties in really well to the elevate your voice concept, because when you do have the opportunity to have people listening to you, I think it really helps that you're not as easily caught up in emotions or let your emotions get away from you. So that was one of my takeaways, and I think it's really helpful.
That's awesome, Annie. And I would say to you, what I really dig is that this really is a blend of art and science, right? The art of collecting yourself, calming yourself, that kind of thing. But the science is that some people may be able to pull this off, but most of us, there's never a time where I would recommend that when all these chemicals, hormones, and peptides are flowing through your brain, that you speak up in that moment. I mean, again, there are superheroes out there. I get it. But I, as a mere mortal, I need that time for that stuff to just calm down before I give my thought, my opinion, my recommendation. And let's face it, I'm being tongue in cheek. I think probably about 99.9% of human beings all should do that. I mean, they just really should. But those are great insights, Annie. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Who else might have something connected to the elevating your voice and the EQ equivalent?
I'll go. the thing that I have been trying to do is watching my own game film, of just being that more self-aware. As a sports fan, that really did relate whenever you explained it that way. So I have a very, like, you can't see it right now, of course, but like all of my emotions are right on my face. So I'm just trying to make sure that whenever I'm taking that pause, that it's a complete pause and not showing something that I don't mean just by that reaction from my facial expression. So watching my own game film, seeing how people are reacting to what I'm doing, that's been the big thing for me. And then the pause is a complete pause, no emotion, just trying to be thoughtful instead of that instant no.
Yeah, that's awesome, Autumn. And thank you for sharing that. And I would like to say to all of you, especially for those of you who are working in sort of the corporate matrix type setup, it's been a long time, but I work with clients as a consultant, and I get a sense that there's still this, sometimes people, they may not feel like they have as much agency and autonomy that they really do. Because, you walk into a room and then there's somebody who has a title a mile long and you feel like you should step back or you should be quiet or whatever. And this is not my call for you to just say whatever you want, do whatever you want, but you have as much right to take a pause, to gather yourself as the CEO of your company. And that's not an insult to the CEO of your company. It just means as a human being, you have a right to do what you feel, do what you know to be necessary so that you can contribute in the strongest of ways. And I just hope for you that for all of you, is that you realize that that's quite frankly a God-given thing, right? And again, it's not a call that you get to say whatever you want to say, whenever you want to say it, but it's a call that, yeah, if I need 6 seconds, Christine, Annie, before I answer the question, I have a right to do that. Now, if you say you don't like that and, why can't you just give me an answer quickly? Maybe we need to have a one-on-one in private where we can discuss why I need that time. I'd like to explain this thing called emotional intelligence, maybe. So as an example, maybe one more person, what's something that's come out for you from the workshop in the elevating of your voice? And I think you might be muted.
Can't hear. Yeah, can't hear.
Mm-mm. And again, feel free to type in the chat if that works better for you, or whenever you get your mic going.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I have 2 separate headsets. The fun thing. I think for me is, as we were discussing in our session, it's realizing not to take everything personal. Remember what somebody might have going on outside of here, or, I don't want to call biases, but thought process, how they process things, how they communicate, what they think they're communicating, how it's being communicated. Thinking about all those things in the midst of having the conversation, so that what's being relayed, you take it with a little bit of grace and saying, okay, what else might be going on to maybe impact this conversation? So that has been very helpful for me a lot.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And to your point, there's great opportunity in pausing to gain that data from the other person, and if we can, again, remember to use those powerful open-ended questions instead of reacting. You said something, I'm offended, now I'm mad, and let's begin the war, right? But if we can take a step back, and again, this is part of our emotional intelligence, that quote regulation, right? We can go, well, what is it about that you don't like? Where do you think that, how do you think it could be better? Maybe even if the relationship is deep enough, why do you feel that acting that way works better than another way? And in most cases, there's two things that are happening there. You just communicated to the other human being that I care enough to listen. I care enough to hear from you versus I'm going to just fire back from what you said, even if what you said was out of line. And then the other thing is that you position yourself to build trust, because maybe this person now understands, wow, somebody really is interested in what I think. And they didn't even like react or fire back at me. That's pretty powerful. So that's awesome. That's great. Okay.
Can I add one thing too?
Go ahead.
Autumn had talked about, which is totally true, about wearing it on your face,
Yeah.
emotions on your face. But I know what I've tuned into more since the workshop is the tone, my own personal tone, which can inflate somebody else's reaction.
Yeah.
And it's not intentional. It's just like wearing the emotions on your face. My tone is not intentional to bring any kind of anxiety to anybody during a conversation, but it is something I've tuned into more.
Yeah, that's really great, Christine. And I would recommend to all of you on the call today, get to know your brain better. And I say it that way because there's so many of these things that we do that are on quasi autopilot because our brain has normalized it, right? And I may have mentioned it in the workshop. Your brain is not a moralist. You know, it's like, it's not going to go to Eric and Christine and say, hey, you know what? You really ought to watch your tone, or maybe you should turn the tone down a little bit. Oh, it's going to go with whatever you begin to build, you know, on and on and on. And then one day becomes two, and two becomes a month, and a month becomes a year. And all of a sudden, well, what's wrong with the tone of my voice? This is how I always talk. And what we forget, and Christine, I sense this from you, is that just because in my head it's perfectly normal and fine, doesn't mean that the person across from me is interpreting that as something to have anxiety about, right? So I just think as we get to know our brain better and understand that, maybe it'll cause us to pause a little bit and examine, and as was mentioned about game film, you know, what are my patterns? And maybe I should ask Christine, hey, Christine, when I do this, do you think that could be interpreted as X? And hopefully, Christine, if there's trust, there's a relationship, she might say, well, you know, Eric, in meetings, sometimes people are really stressed. And when your tone of voice is X, they may interpret it that way. Oh, then we can begin to build a new neural pathway, right? One that's, okay, I'm going to be very conscious of my tone when I'm in staff meetings. I'm going to be very laser focused on that. And then as you continue to work on it, you build a practice around it. And then that awareness, you know, is going to lead you to typically to a breakthrough. I think we have something in the chat, Christine.
Yep, we do. So Becky says, I feel the pauses help me when coworkers are asking for help. I have the tendency to jump in and try to solve the problems and not allow the coworker to finish speaking. Taking a pause before I go to help them reminds me to give them the time to complete their thoughts before moving onward or moving forward on helping them solve the issue. Yeah, I'm with you, Becky. I get that.
There is an applause emoji somewhere on this thing. That's awesome. That is awesome. And everyone, think about the impact that will have on the people that look to Becky for the help, the guidance. I mean, and it can be a ripple effect. And that's kind of what we're aiming for in the end, organizationally, is that there is this culture of EQ. So yes, Becky, that's awesome. That's wonderful. Okay, so if it's okay with you, Christine, I'll just kind of pivot to how's it been going as it relates to adoption? Because as I mentioned in the workshops, you know, you potentially heard a lot of really good information, but it's like anything else. The following workday is coming with all of the distractions, the demands, the agendas, and all of that. So what have you found that's been working well? And I mean, I know you guys mentioned things like the pause and elevating your voice, but maybe even if you want to talk about, here's where I've really struggled a bit, or maybe there was something in the workshop that you're kind of going, now, what does that mean? And how does that apply? So let's open it up that way, if it's okay.
I'm gonna step into this one and say just consistency.
Hmm.
You know, right after the workshop, it was something very much aware of. And then you kind of lose focus, you lose sight, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, you know, I need to reevaluate. Then I jump back in and then I jump back out. So consistency.
Yeah. And Christine, this is the probably only commercial for Spirit of EQ you're going to hear today. That's why we like to stay with our clients for long periods of time, because we understand that you are building new neural pathways, right? And we also understand that in doing that, as everybody can relate at some level, right? Of when is it that you're most prone to give up on something? It's in the early stages, because it's really, really tough. Because we can be on a call and talk about the importance of this and the importance of that and how our brain works and all the rest. But man, when it's a Tuesday morning and you forgot to pick up X and your mother calls and the boss says, why aren't you here yet? Well, I didn't think the meeting was until 10. Okay, I got to run. And it's coming at you, and the frustration, all of those things coming at you, it can be very, very challenging. And our expectation is not, and would never be, that somehow because you came to our workshop that voila, you know, it happens. It takes a lot of work. Now, the beautiful part about it is the resources, right? And there's resources that are free. There's resources in hiring us, all of that thing. I would just tell you, when you are in that moment of where consistency maybe hasn't happened the way that you want, first, apply some self-empathy. Just go easy on yourself. Okay, we're not in the Olympics. We're not playing the U.S. women's soccer World Cup. You know, we're trying to make life better. So go easy on yourself. Now, go easy on yourself, but also get up the next morning and get after it again. Do another attempt again. And even if you come to an end of the day and it's like, man, I feel like I got it about 20% of the time. Well, guess what? Maybe tomorrow when you attempt again, you'll move the needle to 30, right? I think that's huge, Christine, and for everyone, because what we're aiming for is to get to this place. And I'm going to use my music fondness. They always said this about Billie Holiday, the great jazz singer, was that it seemed like when she sang, it was effortless. And when you think about it, most of your great artists put in a lot of time in working on their craft. But when they're on stage, when the moment counts, all of that practice leads to it's effortless. I always watch my tone of voice. I always pause, because you've built that new neural pathway. It's now a part of you. That's when it gets really good. But I recognize that in between, right, in this little area in between, it can be really tough. So go easy on yourself that way. Thank you for sharing, Christine. That's awesome. Who else?
I'll share. So I feel two things that I feel like. So on a personal level, I very similar to Becky, like I am just a very fast moving person, I guess, when it comes to like thoughts and my day-to-day work. And so I notice that I still really have to fight it sometimes. Like, I'm getting better at recognizing when I need to slow down and let somebody else speak. I have the benefit, I guess, of working with a lot of people who are kind of the opposite of me, which works out very well because we balance each other out. But I feel that after practicing, and this is something I've been working on for a while, is that I'm better able to control it, even though I know I still feel that urge in my brain. It's just to kind of like, I feel like I'm maybe halfway through my journey, right? Of like, I still feel that like mental push to be like, but it's definitely, I feel like after practicing this goal for a while, I'm definitely starting to see a difference. And not being, I think some of it for me too is being uncomfortable with things being quiet. Like I don't like a pause. So sometimes I have to learn just to like let other people speak before I jump in, which I'm trying to do on this call. And so if I'm not, call me out on it.
No, Annie, that's awesome. And once again, it's like I wish I could have this video for a commercial for our work, because you just explained some of the science around neural pathways. You have old neural pathways where you maybe 10 years ago, I'm just pulling out a number, maybe 10 years ago, it was always snap, go, right? And then you learned some things that, hey, I need to pause, I need to wait, I need to give, on and on. That's the new neural pathway. But here's the reality. Old neural pathways do not just disappear because we created a new one. They're there, right? And as we continue to practice, more and more your brain will support you in the new, because the new has become the easy, the efficient, the right path, right? But I got to tell you, Annie, that yeah, absolutely, I'm with you. There's times when I should be listening to the end, but I've already started to formulate my response, right? I don't know if you can relate. Anybody can feel me here, right? And I go, well, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be the emotional intelligence, right? But here's the thing, guys, we are human beings. I mean, I get it. AI is going to save the world. But the reality is it's human beings. And I was in a session yesterday, and it was about this idea about when we mess up, when we make mistakes. And I said to them, if we were all to get together and compare notes at how many mistakes we made yesterday, we'd have such a long list, because the reality is we're all making them. So why are we so hard on ourselves? Why is it that we think that we have to be like at this level all the time? No, the people that I think should feel bad about it are the ones who are purposely not trying, who are purposely gaming. Those folks should be concerned. I say that with all seriousness. They should be concerned. But if you're in the camp of, hey, I'm working to get better, I'm trying not to, and I'm making attempts and on, go easy on yourself, because you're doing the work. It may not be fully bloomed yet, but that's okay. That's okay. So thank you, Annie. That was awesome. Christina, I think I saw some in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jeremy had to jump off, but he did say, I just recently became mindful of the fact that I need to add personal items to my daily to-do list as well. I can remember to be mindful in stressful moments, but tend to forget to take a few moments when things are going well. So a little reminder on my daily to-do list has been helpful.
Awesome.
And then Michelle said, I struggle with when you do take a pause and you feel you are trying to give someone their space to be where they're at and communicate, but they keep pushing. Eventually, I get to a point where I feel enough is enough, which is where I may veer away from emotion intelligence with tone, face, etc. Because for me, I start feeling like I have to defend myself. Oh, absolutely feel that way.
Oh,
yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's rather ironic because I have my daughter's getting married in about a month, and we had a bridal shower this past weekend. The bridal shower was it was beautiful. The post-bridal shower, not so much. So when I say, is it Michelle, Christine?
Yes, it
that
is.
come from Michelle? So Michelle, yeah, I can certainly relate. And I'm going to give you guys some advice that I should have taken this past Saturday. When the other person is a continual push, relentless, right? I think in that time of evaluation, the time of the pause, right? The time we're going to let things calm down, probably our executive function of our brain, right? The prefrontal, the decision-making tool, is probably going to tell us this is not going to end well. So the best thing for us to do is to excuse ourselves. Now, I get it. There are certain situations where you may find there is no excuse me. I would also say then, if you cannot get away, then just listen. Just listen. And you know what? I think, Annie, you mentioned the silence sometimes can be a little challenging, right? But if you guys remember from the workshop, I told you about the power of silence. If you're screaming at me, if you're like, pointing your finger and just being aggressive with me, and I'm being calm, I'm listening. Eventually, guess who's going to start to feel a little embarrassed?
The other person.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And this is not a silver bullet for any of you. I'm just saying, as I look back on my Saturday, that would have been the wiser path to take. I'm not going to fight back. I'm not going to return your serve. I'm going to let you hit those, you're going to serve and serve and serve and hit the ball harder and harder. Eventually, you'll get to the place of where either the embarrassment will cause you to slow it down and stop, or you'll run out of things to say. You'll run out of things to accuse. You'll run out of things. That is advice. But yes, that one is really hard. I'm going to just acknowledge that one is really hard. And maybe in some ways you have to reevaluate the relationship. Maybe there's boundaries that need to be set once everything has calmed down. Maybe it's that conversation of, I love you, I respect you, whatever it may be, whatever is appropriate, but I cannot have conversations with you if you choose to treat me with X. That way, you're positioning yourself so that in the next time when things are tense and heightened, it does not become this total like nuclear explosion thing. But anyway, thank you for being vulnerable to share that.
Eric, I think the thing that I struggle with the most is, and this is full transparency of all accord, I entered into the corporate workforce very early in my career. So I've always had to have this tone, this demeanor, this to me. And then when I leave corporate world or work, I still pretty much have this tone, this demeanor. And outside of this structure, it's seen as condescending or talking down or forcing, like I'm overly confident. So you're forcing your will on others with your tone and how you're interacting. And it's like, I know how to turn it on and off. I do.
Yeah.
But that's something I'm learning to like, I'm not being this to you. Why do you feel this way? Like, why are you talking to me like you at work? This is how I talk, kind of. So that kind of a balancing act. Unless I'm like, all the time, people seem to assume that I'm being a certain way towards them, where I've just adapted this structure because I've been in this kind of a structure so long.
Yeah.
Like literally, I think I joined corporate at 22, 23. I'm in my 30s, so I've always had to be very, you know,
I get you. And I think, depending on backgrounds and all of the above, and I'm going to speak a little bit to my time in corporate America. There's a difference between belonging and fitting in, right? And I want to give that clarity, right? For me, belonging is, man, when they opened the doors, the arms were wide open, the smiles were on their face, and they wanted me. And maybe they didn't know me fully, but they wanted to get to know me, and they wanted that there, right? Fitting in is when the environment is typically not welcoming at that overtly, and especially in the beginning. And then we begin the process of, what do I need to do in order to fit in? Now, I'm not judging. Could it have been that the corporation was going through a process of change in leadership and, on and on and on? There could be all kinds of reasons. But here's what I would throw out to you as a recommendation, something that I have tried, because though I'm not in your shoes and I'm not traveling the road that you've traveled, I have had those times when in certain environments, it's like I'm intimidating because of fill in the blank. And I'm not trying to be intimidating. I'm not trying to make anybody feel smaller than they are, but that's where they're at. So I had to come to the conclusion, I can't get into people's heads and kind of understand why they see things the way they see. It just, life does not afford us those kind of opportunities always. So I began to understand the concept about boundaries. And one of the most fabulous exercises I went through, it was a mental health first aid class. I don't know if you've ever been to any of those. It is, I highly recommend it. And Christine, maybe just to this point, I can get you the organization that I went through it, but it's designed to be kind of the first line of help for someone who's going through mental struggles, right? And the same thing as first aid. If somebody, is, a football player is on the field and vomiting. Okay, here's some minimums you can do to get involved. You're not going to diagnose, you're not going to treat, but you can sort of be triage, right? So in this exercise, this psychiatrist said, I want you to draw on a piece of paper a group of circles. You start with the first circle, then another circle around that circle, and then another circle around that circle. And then he asked us to put the initials of people that belonged in that first circle, the ones that are closest to you. These are the people that if you called them at 2 a.m. in the morning and said, I need somebody to pick me up to take me somewhere, I'll be right over. All right. So it could be a parent, it could be a spouse, a partner, a friend, whatever it may be. Put their initials there. And then another circle, that's the group of people that, yeah, if you called them at 2 a.m. in the morning, they probably are like, well, I could call you an Uber. I'm not really in a position to come over. All right, that's that next closest. And then you have the other ring, which is a circle of people who you might have run into them. You see them every 6 months, maybe at a conference or something. His point about doing this is having an understanding about who is truly the people. And in your case, and I didn't, what is your name again? I'm sorry. I just saw your initial.
It's Neota.
Okay, Neota. Where I'm going with this is that those people in that closest circle are the people that want you as you truly are. They celebrate it, they're excited about it, and they'd have you no other way than who you are. Those are the people that you need to recognize, and you're building solid relationship, you're building solid accountability, all of those different things. Once you understand who are in these circles, then you can begin to maybe have a strategy around, well, how do I speak, not speak? What do I share? What don't I share? Because I've met so many people that have these blurred circles. They got people that shouldn't be very close to them, and they are, right? They got people who are on the outside circle that if they would just spend a little more time and getting to know them, those people really care. This is a conscious, intentional way of gaining understanding. Because you know what, Neota, as much as you might try, as much as I might try, it's human beings. And they all come to the party with these presuppositions, these prejudices, the biases, all of that stuff. And quite frankly, life is too short to try to get all that in line so that you can be who you are. Because that's when the best things happen, is when we are who we truly are. Again, I'm not saying that to say that an organization should let you do whatever you want and you can say whatever you want, but it does mean that's where the power begins. And I do firmly believe that emotional intelligence is that tool to help us understand this more and more. So that was a little long, so I'm sorry, but so hopefully that's helpful for you.
Very, thank you.
Sure. All right. So I have another thing I wanted to kind of bring to you guys, just by way of some experience, even since we were last together. And it relates to the idea of this work, right? And what it entails. So you may remember from the workshop that we had that diagram that had these different competencies and these different tools. What I'm going to throw out to you is by way of recommendation, and certainly we can have conversation about it if it makes sense for you, is this idea that when you are looking at these competencies, these are not just mere suggestions that are like, hey, I read this book and it said that if I do X, Y will potentially happen. I'm talking about a legitimate, okay, I'm getting up every day and I'm recognizing what tools do I have at my disposal to manage the various problems and opportunities that I'm going to experience today. Because all of us on this call today, including me, are going to have some surprises this afternoon. Some of those surprises might be, oh my gosh, it's so awesome. I never knew, I didn't expect, and this is great. Some of them may be, I don't know what I'm going to do. I wasn't expecting that. I thought that was taken care of, but now you're telling me it's not. And now I have on and on and on. Sometimes in that situation, if we are not conscious of the tools that we have available to us, we will run inside of our brain and start, okay, what do I do? What do I need to do? How do I figure this out? Where am I going to go? How am I going to do it? Oh my gosh. And then we got the stress, right? And all these things are coming in real time. I would just remind you that the more you get to know the tools and the competencies, and Annie, you know this probably more than anybody on the call, right? It's not like Spirit of EQ created the EQ model and we have the only competencies. There are other programs. This is not a saying that you must follow our empathy competency, but as you are encountering, wherever you're going to go, whatever tools that you have, be intentional and conscious that they are there for you. Visualize that they are there for you. When you have that one-on-one with your boss this afternoon at 3 o'clock, recognize the patterns of what it's like to have a one-on-one with your boss and go, okay, today, because I know that my boss is just getting back from his mom's funeral, I'm going to use the tool of empathy, which means I'm going to slow down and I'm going to listen more. Versus just kind of flying through your day and, oh, it's 3 o'clock, time for my one-on-one, and you're right there. And it's like, you haven't thought of, I'm just telling you guys, the more you practice this, wait until you're sitting with your teenage daughter. Wait until you are sitting with your sister or your brother. It will have huge impact on those people that are closest to you. A huge impact. Because so many people that we interact with every day are not intentional. They're moving from one thing to another. They're struggling to figure out, they're lost. And that's not me indicting them. I'm saying that to say to you, the world needs you. The world needs what you learned in that workshop for you to take it and apply it and push it out to the world. Because the majority of the people you work with, your neighbors, they are flying blind. And again, I'm going to stress to you, that is not an insult or a judgment of who they are as human beings. Because quite frankly, if they felt it were safe, they'd be here to say, I am just flying blind. I can't, I wish someone would listen to me. I wish I could be heard. I wish I could be seen. Well, you guys were exposed to tools and competencies and processes that you could raise your hand and say, I'll listen to you. I'll apply empathy for you. I may not be able to stay an hour. We may have to reschedule something, but I'm willing to. I see you. Because I think one of the greatest threats to our culture, our society, is that we're moving in this direction of where people, when they feel like they're not seen and they're not heard, they move to giving up. And that's not a place we want to be. So, Christine, I got us at 9:44-ish. How can I help further for anyone on the call today? Hopefully this has been helpful. That was my hope.
Does anybody have any other thoughts, something you want to share that maybe we haven't discussed or heard yet?
I mean, first off, Eric, I'll say thank you so much for, the class itself. And, Christine, Eric, like for this conversation today, I think these are the type of things that really help bring that emotional intelligence into our everyday lives, is to keep like having conversations about it. I will say, the one thing I think that is going well at FST is that emotional intelligence is becoming more and more part of the conversation, and it's starting from our C-suite, our executive level teams, and our Jill. You guys know Jill Coleman, our chief administrator. She is like there. She speaks about what she's working on and things that she knows are her weaknesses and strengths, and she like brings them up into a lot of different conversations, and I feel like people are doing that more and more. And I think the more of an example of caring about something like that is seen throughout in an organization, I think the more helpful it is, and just the more people that take it seriously and lead by that example. I think that it's really great to see, whether it's emotional intelligence or change management or things like that, becoming more and more a part of like the corporate conversation, and people taking it seriously, because I think it's just such a huge benefit to a company, in addition to a personal benefit, when people are taking things like this seriously. So it's just good to see. I love conversations like this, and I love, hearing people getting more and more into it, because I think it makes such a huge difference. So thank you for the work that you do, and kind of taking this extra time to have another conversation about it, because I think that's great.
Awesome. And Annie, those are great words. And I would say to all of you, and even for those that maybe are more of the analytical, so what's the return on investment here kind of approach. I'm not gonna, I don't know enough about FST versus your competition, but if I were in Vegas and someone said, okay, here are the bets, you have FST, you have this company, this company, this company, I'm probably going to pay a bit more attention to putting my money on FST, because and I get it, FST has issues, because everybody got issues, right? Every company does. But I think the ROI on EQ, it makes total sense, right? You don't need a formula, you don't need a spreadsheet to calculate it. Because if your people, and for us collectively, if our people are better at managing what they think and what they feel, their decisions are going to be better. And fill in the blank, what happens when we make better decisions? better results, better performance, more success. So I'm glad that you brought that up, Annie, in that way, because I think it is becoming, and for us who have been in this work for a long time, pre-pandemic, this was kind of a nice to have, or there were like the elite organizations were doing it, but everybody else was like, yeah, well, okay, whatever. We got to focus on our quarterly numbers. But I think what's happening is now it's now becoming essential. And I think that's going to be the better for the people that work in the organizations. And obviously FST is in that.
So we have a couple things in chat. Michelle said, I just appreciate the time you've given. Love this topic and would love to continue learning more about it. So we will have those discussions about what might be next. And then Autumn put ditto to what Annie said. She nailed it. Noyota, no, I always get it wrong. I know it's NYOTA, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's
Is it
Neota. It is. Think
Neota.
of your knee and a Toyota. Neota.
Well, that's great. That's awesome.
Neota. This has been all very helpful, and I respect hearing from like-minded people and hearing I'm not alone in the thought process. And Becky said, thank you, Eric, for your time. And I completely agree with Annie. So I think those are all good notes to end on. Eric and I will have some discussions about maybe what's next. I want to remind you all that the Women in Supply Chain and Logistics is the second Thursday in March of 2024. So hopefully you can mark that time on your calendar, and we'll continue this conversation. I think it's important to us, and especially the industry that we're on, that is evolving and changing every single day. So it's great. You guys are on that side of doing the work. So we want to just keep everybody healthy, mentally and spiritually and physically, and all those things feed together. So we can all be together again.
Thank you, everyone. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Eric.
everybody.
Care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.